so excited to have you here.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm excited that we're having this like a global conversation because I live here in Las Vegas in the US and you're in Crete.
Yes, it's amazing all across the world being able to connect over a passion about healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you aren't originally from Crete. So what brought you to Crete?
So I originally grew up in Tasmania, so in Australia, and it was always my dream to come to Greece. We used to come for holidays. Always dreamt of actually living there. But yeah, grew up in Australia, so very different mindset, very different lifestyle to
hmm
Greece.
hmm
Very much like work based, just work and home. Wasn't as much of a relaxed, free lifestyle as it is here. But yeah, definitely a big change in lifestyle and just the people that we.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you say just work and home, what is it like in Greece then, in Crete specifically?
So a big difference with Crete is like, well, just a really easy example is how much people love their cups of coffee. Like
Uh-huh.
it's such a big part of the lifestyle here just to meet people with coffees. But when we stay to meet for a coffee, in Australia, like you would maybe go out for a coffee, right? But it'll be like 20 minutes and then you would have to rush back to your shift. They would have to rush back to their thing. Whereas here, it's like a coffee would be 3 hours, 4 hours. You just
hmm
talk a lot. It's just a lot of time of just slowing down, just talking with everyone. Like everyone just talks, and
hmm
which again, it's not a thing as much in Australia. You're very much like on your phones and rushing from one place to another. Whereas here, you walk down the street, you're off to an appointment or something, and you meet someone along the way, start chatting, and a few hours just goes by, and everything's just so relaxed. So no one really cares.
hmm
Which has the good parts and bad times because nothing starts on time, which is the opposite to Australia, which is very strict.
So it's just very relaxed. It's very relaxed. People aren't in a rush.
Yeah, and just a lot more actual communicating face to face with people, not as glued to devices wherever you go. Right? Even just like waiting at a bus stop, this is a really random example, but like, I've waited for many buses in Australia. Never, not once have I actually had a conversation with someone at a bus stop ever. Because you're just on your phone, they're on their phone. Whereas here, it's like someone will always bring up a conversation.
And so that's probably done wonders just for your mental health.
Yeah, well, it was definitely a good practice going from social anxiety to having conversations wherever you go.
Well, yeah. And then also, I think just the pressure, right? The pressure that people live under and like depending on the culture that they're from.
Yeah, 100.
Like, you know what I mean? I know here in the US, like a huge part of our mental health is the pressure that all of us are under and the capitalism and the work, grind, hustle, hustle, hustle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's actually quite interesting as well because coming back to Greece, like it's really interesting how they're able to do this. They're very good at working many, many hours in the day, but always prioritizing having some of that time where you're going to go out with friends and just relax. Like most people here, like if you're living alone, especially, you're going to be working, to pay your rent and, just the basics, right? Which only gives you a few hours of rest time a day, but even that rest time would probably be with other people. Like, no matter how many hours they're working, they will find a way to infuse this lifestyle.
So, with that being said, and are people getting enough sleep?
No, sleep is definitely a big issue here. Like they do not sleep.
Okay.
And I
Like,
struggle with it a lot.
I'm going to spend time with my friends and I'm going to do like, my hobbies or whatever.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's
Okay.
crazy, especially like in the summertime.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, like, I'm an early bird. Like, I want to be sleeping at like 10 o'clock, I think is a pretty good time for me to switch off. Whereas, like, especially if it's someone you haven't seen someone in a while and you message them to go for a coffee, well, that is probably going to be at 12 o'clock at night when they start going out and they come back at 5, 6 in the morning and they start work in the morning. It's like,
Crazy.
yeah, yeah,
I can't even imagine that. Like, I can't even imagine going for coffee at 12 in the morning. That's crazy.
there's no cut. Like, there's no limit in the summer. Like, this the day and the
Yeah.
night that you confuse because you have that coffee, so then you don't have to sleep basically, and you just keep going in the morning.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. So, I'd love to talk about your story because it was really fascinating to me. And I thought, gosh, it's going to be a really powerful story for other people to hear because you essentially like healed yourself from social anxiety And, I think that a lot of people don't understand that healing is possible, number one, right? They think, well, if I'm experiencing mental health challenges long term, that means that's going to be my life. And I don't believe that that's true for the majority of people. And I also, you did this in a way that was different than what we're usually told, right? Go to talk therapy and be on medication, and that those are your options. And so I'd love for you to share your story, like about social anxiety and, what that looks like for you and your journey.
You're absolutely right with what you said. I think it's really important to share these sort of stories so that people know that healing isn't a one size fits all. Like if one traditional thing didn't work for you, it doesn't mean that you can't be healed. It doesn't mean that you're trapped for life because it can really feel like that way when you're in it. But yeah, so for me, social anxiety has pretty much always been a part of my life as far back as I can remember. There was always that social anxiety, always that feeling of panic whenever I was in a crowded space. So, I mean, this really started to have a really big impact at school. I was just having constant panic attacks in the classroom, feeling really trapped there, but really suffocated around all the people and just constant panic attacks, being sent to the principal's office to sort of get out of the environment for a little bit and then being sent down. And you just immediately feel like that odd person out because you're always having to be sent out. You're always having these panic attacks and everyone's just looking at you like you're absolutely crazy because obviously no kid in a young age is really going to be aware of anxiety, right? It's not really something
Mhm,
that we are taught about
mhm.
at schools, which maybe we should have been. But anyway,
Yes.
that's a topic for another day. But yeah, so eventually my parents, like any caring parent, thought that therapy would be a good idea to help manage things. It's sort of the first thing people turn to. And I really, really did try to commit to therapy because my parents were really convincing me that this is the way to stop feeling like this and to be able to sit through your
Mhm.
classrooms. And, they paint like a lovely picture on the other side of therapy. And so
Yeah.
that was many years. That was around 10 years for me.
Question about the therapy. What type of therapy was it? Was it just talk therapy?
Just mostly. And then later down the line, I had night terrors and insomnia. So then we went to specialists for sleep. And then I also developed eating disorders after that. And then that was an eating disorder specialist sort of therapy. So
Mhm.
it's for a few different.
Was the specialist for sleep, was it a therapist or a psychologist, or you might not remember, you were a kid, but
No, yeah, I'm really not that sure. But the sleep therapist didn't last long at all. I only went for like a month and I decided that I really didn't like him and I was sick of therapists. So I was, grumpy teenager. I wasn't really interested in trying many things.
well, yeah, and also like when you've done a lot of things for a long time, right? It's like
Your motivation starts to go. It's like, well, how long am I really going to sit through this?
yes. So, and then I know you shared that you tried medication as well.
Yeah, so after maybe the first 5 years or so of therapy, then we moved on to medications.
Mhm.
And my dad really wasn't on board with this one. It was more so my mom's side, but again, it's the thing that she had heard of a lot being
Yeah.
used. So, they're coming from a good place.
Well, it's really the only information they're given. Yeah.
Exactly. If you go to a doctor and you say your kid has anxiety, what do I do? They're going to tell you therapy and medication. They're not going to even mention the other things most of the time.
Mhm.
But yeah, with medication, it just made me feel like an emotionless robot. Like, yes, it numbs away some of that anxiety, but it also numbs away your joy, your excitement, your just emotions that make you feel alive.
Well, that's what I say to people often is you have to understand that it's not like the medication can select one
Hmm.
emotion or one pathway of like, oh, it's
Exactly.
social anxiety or it's anxiety. Let's just turn the volume down on that, but let's keep it turns the volume down on every.
Yes. And I think there's such a misconception with medications because they think that it somehow magically targets just that one emotion that you don't like, but everything else stays the same. But it's not at all the case.
No, it's really not.
And as well as that, I just really hated the idea of like relying on pills to get through my day instead of because there was also the feeling of I just wanted to understand what was happening, because you just feel like your mind's attacking you all the time. You're like, why? What did I do?
Yeah, you wanted to find more of a solution than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. To understand the solution, not just taking something to numb it, but like understanding. the why behind it as well. But so after not doing so well with the medications, I ended up just beginning to skip classes altogether. You know, it was I couldn't focus in the classrooms. I was having so many panic attacks, so I pretty much just stopped showing up altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, naturally I began looking for other ways to numb away the pain. Because I did get a little taste of it, of what it's like to feel less anxiety when I was on those medications.
Yes.
And so that's what led to me for a good few years of self-medicating, which
Mm-hmm.
started with alcohol and then transitioned to drugs. And it was just a way that I could numb everything happening, you know.
Yeah. How old were you when you first started with alcohol?
About
Mm-hmm.
15, around
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, it was pretty much just drinking until you don't feel anything every night and then passing out and just that on repeat. Because, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I would pretend to go to school, but then I'd just end up spending the day at the beach drinking and just sleeping and drinking. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
But then my stomach didn't like that so much. And it also affected my eating, you know. And then just sort of started transitioning into drugs. I don't really remember why, but there was a reason, I'm sure. And that was yeah, that was an experience. That was a dark hole that's very hard to climb out of.
It really is. It is really hard. I
Yeah.
experienced the same thing. So I understand. It's like yeah.
And you know, you feel like you're doing something good because you're making the anxiety go away, but you know, you're also not having a life afterwards. So then that also led me down a path of eating disorders, which was also connected to the anxiety because you know, anxiety can have a really big impact on your gut. And one of my main responses to my anxiety was nausea. So the fact that I was always feeling sick, I just sort of made it up in my head that if I just don't eat, then I won't have to feel sick, and then it's all fine, you know? So that was my mindset for quite some time.
This is actually really powerful, especially for like if a parent is listening, because be very lonely when you're a kid and a teen experiencing mental health challenges and you're trying to figure out how to help yourself feel better. And you're a kid or a teen. So it's not like, unless you're given real constructive skills, like you just do whatever you can, and it can lead to some really unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? I mean, even adults, but like as a kid, it can be very lonely and it can be very scary. And you just know you want to feel better. You don't really understand what's happening to you or why, and so it's a really hard place to be in if you don't have supportive parents or you don't have parents who are educating themselves and helping you get educated, or you don't have parents who, I mean, they just don't know what to do, so they just kind of listen to whatever they're told, and they don't know what other resources, right? And it just can be really lonely. And I think any parents listening, like, listen to your kids, be willing to investigate and research and learn new things, and learn new possibilities for healing. Just because your kid, like your kiddo, you don't want them to go silent after a while. Like, I'm curious, after things stopped, like you tried the stuff, right? You tried the therapy, you tried medication. I'm curious if you stopped really like going to your parents for support.
Well, so this is a little bit of an interesting question. My mom, I mean, she was brought up in a really small village here in Crete, right? So they were brought up to be really tough sort of people, right? And anytime I would complain about anything mental, she would always just be like, in my age, we were actually tough and you were all crybabies and you think the world's going to end because you're feeling this way. And like, I'll never forget. And this is also a really good point for any parents as well, because there was this one time that like stuck with me for so many years. The very first time I went to therapy, my mum wanted to come because I was still, you know, quite young at the time, and she thought it was a better idea. And I'll never forget this moment because she just destroyed my self-esteem in one sentence. Goes up to the therapist and she's like, oh, I did the same thing with this one that I did with the first son. I don't know why this one didn't turn out right. And you know, because you have been feeling that way for yourself all your life, thinking that you are broken and you're that odd one out. And then you hear them say it too. And it's like, oh, okay, so I'm not the only one that believes this. So I am just a lost cause, you know, and it just destroyed me.
Yes. That's actually really like that's a really thank you for sharing that because parents don't understand sometimes how powerful their words are. And when I used to practice therapy and I saw a lot of kids and teens, I never ever let the parent bring their child the first session because parents typically don't know what's like they're overwhelmed too, they're frustrated, they're humans, they're usually not educated on what's happening and a lot of stuff comes out of their mouth that could be that's totally human but could be very detrimental to their child.
Yeah, and it could be coming from a good place, but then
Totally.
doing that damage, right? Yeah.
But it still does the damage, right? Like it and so I would have I would have the conversation with the parent first and then I would give them some guidelines for what the first session with their kid would like we're not going to say this. We're not going to talk about this. We're not going to frame it like this. And here's how you're going to frame therapy. Like, because your kid's going to think that you're bringing them here because they're broken or there's something wrong with them and they're not. Right. And so I really try to set the stage for the child to
Yeah.
be really well supported. And that's just a really great, I'm so glad that you shared that.
Yeah, it's really important. Like, and we hold on to things so much. So, when
Abs-
we hear something that may seem really insignificant to the parent, a random sentence that you said maybe because you were exhausted at the end of the day and the kid was being really annoying, but that one sentence could stick around for so many years and create that core belief that they live by. I think
Absolutely.
it's very easy to forget about this.
Yes. Okay. So your mom was like, hey, you suck it up. You're mentally tough, like, type of thing. And
So she wasn't very much, she's just not a very talkative person. She's not someone that I would ever go up to just for a conversation. It's not really her thing. So
yeah.
I didn't talk to her about things. My dad used to work all of the days and be home only late at night. So I didn't really see him all that much in childhood. So yeah, no, there wasn't really much of a person to talk to. That's why I was looking for things to numb, to find comfort from, and that's what led to the alcohol, to the drugs. And then also in the teenage years I had back surgery, and this is when things started to turn around for me. I had, do you know, scoliosis, like that curvature of the spine. I had been wearing back braces for a few years, but the curve was continuing to get bigger even with the back brace. So we ended up needing the surgery. And after surgery, they recommended me to go to physio. Didn't like the physio. I was a little
Okay.
bit picky. But then someone recommended yoga. And this is when things really started to turn around because I went to yoga purely to help with the back pain because,
How old were you?
13 or 14 when I had the
Oh,
surgery.
wow.
So I,
Okay.
I was quite young. I would have done things quite differently if I could turn back the time now. Anyway, because I had no back pain before. After the surgery, I had growing back pain that was just continuously getting worse over the years.
After the surgery.
Yeah, before there was no pain at all.
Okay.
Afterwards, it would just continued getting worse. And so, doctors kept suggesting painkillers, but then the painkillers had bad reactions with my stomach. And then it was a lot of pills going on. They weren't really helping. So yoga became like my stability.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing was, even though I went there for pain management, this was when I started to have like a little window of hope for my mental state as well. It was the first time that I really discovered my breath, as simple as that sounds. Like I was super anxious in that first class and I could barely hear anything because, my head was just going crazy with like, they're judging you and you're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong and all the things. And because I had a metal rod in my back, I couldn't do half the poses. So, I already felt like I was going to be the odd one out. But it was like near the end of the class, my mind started to shut down just a little bit for me to hear like one or two sentences from the teacher from the whole class. And it was about the breath. And it was that first time that I really put my hands in my belly and just felt the breath and felt connected to the breath. And that moment really sparked my curiosity. It was
Interesting.
something that, I felt like I could control, but something that was like
Yeah.
affecting me in an internal way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really sparked my curiosity. And I started working one on one with the yoga teacher, also because I just couldn't do the poses in class, but also so we could
Right. You
focus
needed
more on the
coaching and
anxiety as well. And so that was a really interesting time. And that really, really helped. So she was telling me about meditation, like she became much of a mentor for me. So it was amazing how I go there just for a physical thing. And I had a very different experience than what I was expecting. But it was a very pleasant surprise. But I was still very much in that hole with drugs at the time, so I wasn't consistent. Like it's like that experience and you feel it and it's amazing. And then months will go by and you forget about it. And then, when the back pain gets too much, then you go back
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that sort of up and down thing. But eventually it just hit rock bottom. Like it was just getting, the drugs were just taking over everything.
Mhm.
And that was when like I hit my rock bottom and I just knew something had to change that. Like if I stay in this loop, we're not going
Yeah.
anywhere very fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was actually when I booked my tickets to Greece. So I was
Okay.
just thinking like I want to get out. I need to break this cycle. And I felt like if I stayed in that place, because it's a really small town, you attract the same kind of people, it was
Mhm.
felt very trapped there. Mind you, I could have just gone in mainland Australia or somewhere a lot closer, but no, the very high me at that moment just randomly booked tickets to Greece. I had no plan, no idea
Mhm.
what's going to happen there, but I knew just wanted to get out.
How old were you?
20, I think,
Okay. Okay. Mhm.
20. Yeah,
Mhm.
the drugs lasted a few years, so it wasn't like a short yeah, time to reach to that point where I was just like, "I can't do it anymore."
Mhm.
Yeah, so that was a big step, and then, of course, as the day got closer, I was getting super, super anxious about it, so, of course, I was just, numbing it all away, numbing it all away. That was just the way to deal with everything. It was a very stupid idea, though, because I also took some drugs before getting on the plane. But, like, when I get on the plane, I'm gonna get really anxious, so good to have something that will kick in about there. Terrible idea. Terrible. You should not do that on a 16-hour flight. It doesn't work well.
Mhm.
But yeah, eventually I got to Athens after like 2 days worth of traveling. It's a long distance.
Yes.
And that was the moment for the first time in years that I was actually sober, and it was extremely overwhelming because I was feeling all the emotions that I hadn't felt in a long time, but also having just landed across the world alone with no plan and having to face people, because in Australia I had that comfort of if I had to go to the supermarket, if I had to go somewhere that I had to talk to someone, I would put someone in front of me. I would never do the speaking.
Mhm.
That could be enough to cause me to panic at that time.
Mhm.
So I'd always bring a friend so the friend could do the talking. I'm always in the background. So I knew also that this was my way to force myself to actually
It
speak.
was like full immersion therapy.
Like, yeah, I'm doing it all.
I have that. You didn't have any of that anymore.
Yeah, it was just like the most cold turkey moment ever because it's like
Seriously. That's
don't have
incredible
anything.
to me. Yeah, good for you. You know what? Your spirit knew you needed it. You know what I mean?
That's it. I truly believe there was something in me that just knew that this was the way that things were going to really change and,
Yeah.
end up being something really, really good. And so it was my time in Greece that I really started exploring different natural ways to heal.
Mhm.
Pills of the medication, of the self-medicating, all that stuff. So I was like, right, we know what doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
Now it's time to explore the other side. And this is when I also, again, started working with that mentor from Australia.
Mhm.
She already knew a lot of my past and, we had already done a little bit of work together. And so I dived really, really deep into things like mindfulness and meditation. Just the learning to separate myself from my thoughts was such a big moment. When they're always there, when the anxious thoughts are always there and overpowering you, you just you end up just sort of, I can't think of the word now. You sort of label yourself by these thoughts, you identify, that's the word I'm looking for. You identify yourself by your anxiety, right? So this was really powerful to learn to separate. And my big thing was journaling.
Mhm.
So like this was one of the main reasons I think therapy really wasn't a good fit for me was because I could never actually openly talk to them. I was
Yeah.
way too anxious. I didn't know you. It didn't matter how many months we spent together. I'm not opening up to you. I didn't
Mhm.
open up to anyone. I mean, if I wasn't going to talk to my own mother, I'm not going to talk to a therapist.
Right.
But journaling has really proven to be my way of expressing, and I
Mhm.
still do it now. If I'm feeling overwhelmed about something, if I feel especially emotionally overwhelmed, I just write.
Mhm.
And this gave me a lot of insight in myself, because reading it back, I realized a lot of things that I think that I'm not aware that I'm thinking. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Because you're on autopilot in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
exactly. So it was a big moment of self-discovery. It was
Yeah.
really, really interesting. A child healing work as well,
Mhm.
and really understanding where a lot of the things I've been carrying really comes from.
Yeah.
Being able to again separate myself from this, recognizing that this is a belief that maybe came from this person,
Yes.
But at some point, it's my responsibility that I'm continuing to believe it. I'm continuing to act upon it, because I think it's really easy to fall into that little trap of just blaming that person
Yeah.
for your thoughts now, for your way of living now. But, there's a big difference is recognizing where that's coming from and then separating yourself. I find it really,
Yeah. I think there's a big so that's something I used to speak to my clients about, and this phrase actually radically transformed my own healing journey, and I learned it as a therapist when I was getting certified in dialectical behavior therapy. And it was, the things that happened to you were not your fault, but you are 100% responsible for healing them, right? That's the truth about life. And I think, sometimes people, we fall into a trap of blame versus putting responsibility for the initial wound where it should go, right? Like, so it's okay to say, like, my parent gave me that wound, or you know what I mean, or like a teacher, whatever. However, it's still my responsibility to heal the wound. Like, nobody's going to heal it but me.
yeah.
And I think that that's a huge challenge for people, right? Like, it's a huge challenge to take that responsibility.
Mm.
And I think that in itself can leave people feeling stuck and unwell for a very long time.
Definitely. And I see this a lot in clients with my coaching as well that, when we get to that point where you're looking back at the past, which, there's almost always some resistance there because we all know that there is something that we've been hiding or
Yeah.
avoiding.
Yes.
And when you get to that point, it's so easy to get stuck in a cycle of, again, avoiding taking responsibility,
Mhm.
whether that be through the person or anything else. We will always look for ways to avoid taking the responsibility on ourselves, right? But I think this is also the moment where you really take control back as well.
Yes.
Only when you do that and you realize that I'm in control of the way that I'm allowing that belief to affect me. I'm in control of the way that I'm reacting to this thought. Just making that separation and like processing that in your mind. And once you start thinking this way, it can give you so much power back.
Yes.
You feel so much more empowered, and it's not, your brain is against you. It's learning to live in harmony with those thoughts and learning that they're not here to attack you. They're just different options being served to you. Then you get to choose. It's not they are controlling you. It's completely the other way around. But if we don't learn to harness that, then
Mhm.
we're never going to know. We're always going to feel like a prisoner in our own mind. And I think
Yes.
this is the thing that really needs to be more understood. That it's
Mhm.
not about finding something to rely on to make yourself feel good, but understanding how you can make yourself feel good. Because I think this
Yes.
powerful thing to know how to control yourself instead of relying on other things.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So going back to your journey with the inner child healing, how did you find that as a young? Because this is one of the things that I think sometimes people are like, and I know social media is different now, and there's even more resources and education. But how did you get introduced to inner child? Did your yoga instructor introduce you? Like, did somebody suggest it?
The actual concept of inner child healing and as a topic to explore was something that the yoga teacher back in Australia had mentioned. She didn't know a whole lot about it, but she just sent me at first, she just sent me, a couple of meditations and things to try. And then it just really sparked my curiosity. And, I was just fully committed to exploring all paths at that point. This was the time that I was dedicating myself to anything natural healing. So I honestly I just read a lot of books and just tried things myself. And, some things I tried didn't work, other things were really impactful. But then this is also about just finding what works best for you. Because I find this with clients as well, that like, the same approach to inner child healing will work really well for one person. The other person won't feel at all connected and they just feel like they're wasting their time. So I think it's also just
Yes.
finding what's going to work best for you. 'Cause we have that idea again that healing is a one size fits all. You just send your kid to therapy and then it's done, and then they're back to normal and they're back in society. But healing is so unique because it's all based on your unique experiences that have led you to this point. So we can't expect it to be one thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the other thing that is really profound about your story is that you were willing to try different things, and you were willing to give it time, and you treated it like a journey. and you keep saying curious. And I just want to point that out because I also, for either if you're on your own healing journey as an adult or listening in or you're a parent, stuff takes time. It takes time and you have to experiment. You have to be willing to give that experiment a little bit of time, and if it doesn't work, be hopeful that you will figure it out. Like everything is, in my opinion, everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
But I've been healing since I was 18 and I'm 42. It takes time, right? And there's been periods of time where I'm like, "Oh, this doesn't feel like it's working." And then I go through periods where I make catastrophic leaps, and
Yeah,
it's because of actually all the little seeds and things that I was doing leading up to it. And it's
absolutely.
just you have to be willing to take the journey. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I think this is such an important reminder, especially because we're living in this world that's so just instant fixes for everything. There is a pill for
Yes.
everything. We can just ignore everything. So we're very, very good at masking our problems.
Yes.
Slap a big band-aid on it, pretend it's not there and continue on your day. And so when someone hears that it's going to take time, it can be really off-putting as well.
Yes.
But I really think it's the kind of healing that takes the most time is the one that's going to give you lifelong healing, right? It's not something that you
Yes.
do every time you feel anxious. It's a
Yes.
way of life even, rather than something that you have to feel like you're constantly showing up to.
That what you're saying, the healing is a way of life.
Because I think we forget how much just our daily habits impact our mental health as well.
People don't even understand.
Like how we're self-sabotaging ourselves every morning without realizing it?
I mean, just as simple as not getting enough sun. Back in the day, like people were outside all like we were created really just being outside pretty much the majority of the day. Most jobs were you were out in the fields or you know what I'm saying? You had a tiny little like space for during, for sleep time, and most people mostly lived outside.
Yes.
And now we live in a society where, I mean, you don't really as much as say I do, right? But we live in this time where all we are is inside all the time. And the sun is a huge part of our mental health, our circadian rhythm, our sleep, our ability to make certain, neurotransmitter. And people, just that basic thing, people are don't understand that they're getting starved of that.
Hmm.
And it feels like a task. Like even sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even go outside. You know what I mean? Like I didn't go outside for at least 20 minutes today and get some basic sun exposure.
That's
That's
it.
sad that that is like the reality.
It is, and I think it's such an important thing because I truly believe like a lot of our mental health is coming from this massive disconnection that we're experiencing from nature.
One thought.
The thing that's really not beginning to be recognized in our society from studies that are showing that like being around soil and soaking your hands in soil can have the same impact as antidepressant pills. In other countries, GPs are now prescribing people time in nature for anxiety, for stress, for depression. Like it's really beginning to be recognized. And I think, yeah, I think it's just such an important thing. And it's something I use a lot in my coaching as well, just time in nature and just understanding how that's going to impact you. And, just like slight different ways, instead of rushing to work, just giving yourself an extra 5 minutes, do it mindfully and just notice the sounds around you. Take
Yes.
to notice what you can smell, what you can feel, just tuning in because we're so used to being on autopilot. And I think this is where we gain a lot of our habits that are feeding things like social anxiety without us realizing it. And that's why we feel so trapped because we don't know how we got there.
No, it's been this evolution, and a lot of my own healing journey in the last, I would say, year and a half has been less about, I mean, I do the deep healing, but it's been more about shifting my lifestyle. Just how my day looks has made a tremendous impact on my mental health.
Absolutely.
Getting outside, getting just even 30 minutes of it doesn't even have to be intense movement, just like a walk.
Mm,
30 minutes to an hour, but if I only have 30 minutes, like making sure I actually move my body, making sure I'm nourishing myself. And people think like, okay, that's not, and I'm like, no, like it really does, because we have gotten so far away from how we were designed to live.
exactly. And also just thinking about the pressure that we're on. We're not built to be so active and alert all of the time, and especially our minds. So many people are having these issues with sleep, especially with, that issue of having anxious thoughts when you're trying to go to sleep. And yet they're in bed and they're on their phone scrolling social media, which is literally telling your mind to wake up and be alert and flooding it with all of this information to process that it's not even built to do. It's not built to process that amount of information in that short.
No, you're right. It's like how do I want to say it? It's like our brains. It's almost like social media makes our brains feel like they're computers, just like inputting so
Yeah,
much data. Sometimes I'll catch myself scrolling and I'll be like, this is too much information. Like and I'm like a high performer. I'm a big, but I'm like, this is just flooding me with so many options and so much. This is not healthy. And I will put my phone away. I'm like, no, like I can recognize it. You know what I mean? Yeah,
absolutely.
it's crazy.
It's like when I haven't been spending as much time as usual in nature, like I feel it instantly. Like my brain turns into
Yes.
sludge. Like I just can't focus on anything. I feel so foggy, and it's like I know every time exactly what I need, but I find it really interesting because like previously I would never notice these things.
Yeah, you probably weren't super in tune or aware.
No, but it's really interesting how once you start changing that lifestyle and and it's just the small changes, right? It's not like
Yes.
you are changing everything about your life. It could be just changing the first 10 minutes of when you're waking up in the morning. But once you basis, when you try to return back to the old habits, you can really feel the damage that it was doing.
Yes.
Really interesting that we can get that realization once you sort of flip that. But I think there's also like a big misconception that it has to take a lot of time. 'Cause I'm a big believer that like it's the consistent actions that is what's going to give you the lasting results. Like when we're looking for like a yoga practice, because I also did when I did my yoga teacher training, I also did yoga therapy for anxiety. And, even just like dedicating the first 5 minutes of when you're waking up to mindfulness and just slowing down. Like that's how I started. Like it was literally just 5 minutes a day. Because
Yeah.
we have this image that it has to be a perfect 1 hour practice and to be every day and to be perfect. And that pressure just leads to that overwhelm and we end up giving up and then we never experience any of it.
Yeah, you're totally right. All these lifestyle changes that I've been making over the last year and a half, like it started off very small. It was not, it wasn't, I didn't overhaul that. You can't, like, I mean, some people can, but most people can't just overhaul everything overnight. It's like you make these tiny little shifts. And one of the big things that I did initially was fix my circadian rhythm. And that's all I focused on, because like I had a actually pretty healthy lifestyle in general, besides the fact that I was a workaholic and like in hustle mode all the time. But that affected my circadian rhythm, because then I wouldn't prioritize like sun exposure and not getting on my phone as soon as I woke up, and like these types of things that affect your circadian rhythm. And so that's what I focused on. I maintained everything else and I focused on healing my circadian rhythm just little by little. And that made a ripple effect in my life.
Amazing.
And then I had capacity to do other little things, right? And that's what I'm hearing that you did, is that it's not like I mean, you did overhaul by moving to Greece, but outside of that, but and I do want to say this, like some people need to actually change their environment in a radical way, or else they're going to be stuck forever. Like that's just the truth. Like it really is.
I think so too. So sometimes you do just need that change of environment, and that can be different for everyone. Like that could be just moving cities, that could be moving countries, that could be, but changing what you're seeing in your day-to-day life to sort of snap you out of it. But my thing was also really largely just I knew that if I moved that far away, I wasn't going to be able to instantly find drugs, to just get back
Or
to
like
the
a
same
crutch
rhythm.
of like a friend to do things for. Yeah, you needed to remove your choices that weren't serving you anymore.
That's it. You just don't have the choice anymore. Have to face everything on your own. Like, although it was extremely difficult, especially at first, and very just overwhelming, experiencing your emotions for the first time in so many years, but all of the emotions. But like I wouldn't change a thing about it, because that's what really started my healing journey and dedicating to it,
Well,
you know.
yes. And the other thing that you did was, I mean, some people will change their environment, but then they won't change their habits or their practices. And I think that's the second piece is that you did it knowing, like, I'm going all in on myself. Like, I'm going to change how I cope because eventually you probably could have found drugs, right? Or you could have
Absolutely.
made some friends who you hung around with who maybe weren't the best for you, and you could have fallen back into the same personal loops that you and patterns that you lived before.
That's it.
But
And
you had this commitment to yourself that you were going to be different, and you don't know how, but you were going to figure it out little by little.
exactly. It's having that intention behind the action because it's really easy to, as you said, like change locations, move somewhere else, but then just continue the same thing and just create the same lifestyle because we need to have the reason why we're taking that action. If we're just randomly taking actions without knowing why. And I think this was another big thing about, again, the traditional methods for me. It was just following the doctor's orders every time. And there wasn't really much explaining of
Yeah.
why I felt this way and why I felt powerless in my own mind, why I felt broken. It was just take this thing to fix this other thing.
Yeah.
But normally that pill also comes with a bunch of side effects on its own, right? Something else that we never talk about, right? Because it's just accepted. It's just something that we have to just push by. Otherwise, and I think this is a really big thing that we are fed through social media as well. Just learning to hide a lot of the discomforts that we live in.
Yes. That's one of my big reasons why I do this is because of my own experience, really bad side effects from being put on meds as a teen, really bad.
I've heard it
So
so many times as well from clients. A lot of the time, this is what has led people to explore natural healing because they've had a really awful experience with medication.
it's really not talked about enough. It's not, doctors, it's like and there could be, blah, 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 but that's very rare. And it's kind of like, okay, but I don't actually think it's very rare because there's so many people all over sharing their stories.
That's
And
it.
it's really not that rare, right? It's hard because that's the main option or whatever. But
Yeah.
so you started practicing, you got a yoga certification and now you're coaching. So clearly you've come to this place where you feel grounded enough where you're like, okay, I want to help others on this journey.
That's it. And I think and this is because I always think back to my own experience when I'm doing any sort of teaching or anything back in that position and what I feel like I would have needed or what would have made my journey a lot easier. And I think a big part of it is trusting someone that has been in your shoes, that has been through that experience. Because this is my main resistance with therapy was that I just never felt understood.
Yes.
So really understanding that this person has been there and they understand that. And this was a big part of why I wanted to help people with social anxiety because I understand what it's like to be there and to feel so trapped in it and to just feel like you just need to, because I see this so many times, people giving out advice that with anxiety, you just need to learn to live with it and just accept that that's how you're going to be. And it makes me very angry when I see these comments because I see it so often, but
Yes.
it's
Well,
so,
there's
you know,
even people who are like practitioners and who are therapists and online saying, well, you can't heal anxiety, but you can learn to live with it and you can learn to turn the volume down to a certain degree. And I'll be completely vulnerably honest. I think there was a period of time in my own therapy practice when I was way less educated on all this that I believe that too.
Mm.
Like, I didn't think you could actually heal these things. I thought, okay, you can learn a lot of amazing coping skills and you could probably reduce the symptoms or you can, down to almost minimal, but you'll always have that be like a part of your life. Whereas now I don't believe that from my own experience, from my own healing experience, and also seeing so much evidence in different practices. And so it's hard, like when people are being told like, oh, you just have to learn how to like live with it, manage it, or whatever. And it's like, it's hard. It makes you feel hopeless.
That's it. And that's why I think it's just so important to just keep spreading the word about this because it's just, there are so many things that you can do to heal and the resources are just not out there because there's so
Mhm.
many missed messages happening and it gets really confusing, you
It
know?
does.
And that was
It
the
does.
other thing, like I never found someone, and maybe it's because I was in Tasmania and it was a small place, but I never found someone that specializes just in anxiety either.
Mhm.
That would have drawn my interest a lot more as well if I didn't feel like I knew that this person was specialized in this thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, so then I did my yoga teacher training, and interestingly enough, I did this when I was recovering from my second back surgery. We
Mm.
put the metal in Australia, the pain kept getting worse. But in Australia, the doctors, again, the difference in doctors, and now I have trust issues with doctors in general. Like in Australia, I went to Melbourne, I went to Sydney, I went all over to visit doctors to remove the metal. The pain just kept getting worse. And they just all turned around and said that that's not an option, that once the metal is in, it's in for life, and that's just the way that it works. And I just have to learn to deal with the pain. They offered me to give me disability payments, and so I could stop working and just be at home in pain all day. That was their one solution.
That is so crazy to me.
And I was a teenager, you're telling a 15-year-old to just accept that they're going to be disabled for the rest of their lives because the back pain has no solution, right? Now, fast forward 7 years after my surgery, I was in Athens. My pain was so bad that I couldn't last longer than 3 hours at my seated job. Like sitting for 3 hours was too much to bear. And I went to a neurosurgeon there and he was so shocked. In Greece, they have the same surgery. After 1 year, they remove the metal. 1 year. And in Australia, literally begged them to take it out. And they said it's not an option. It doesn't exist as a surgery. And I had it for 7 years. And he was like, I'm surprised you can even walk with that much metal. Because they also used more metal than they would have in Greece. So that was an experience and a half. So it was removing that metal. But then the problem was my muscles in my back hadn't worked for the past 7 years. So,
Yeah.
it was a whole journey of rebuilding and getting to know my body again through the yoga. And then at that same time, I started my yoga teacher training. So it was a very intense period, but a very, very empowering one as well. And then actually quite soon after that, it was like 6 months after I started teaching yoga, I started training for becoming a coach as well.
Mhm.
Because although yoga was a massive part of my journey and it's how everything began, I wanted to share a lot more of the different things that I did, sharing the inner child work, the inner healing, that the multiple practices alongside yoga. And that's what led me to the coaching side of things. And now I do a little bit of a combo.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, I would love for us to hear just a little bit about your coaching because we're going to have your links in the show notes. So anyone who wants to connect with you and potentially work with you will be able to do that. And so I'd love for you just to share maybe just a little bit about your coaching and who you help and who you support.
Absolutely. So my main specialty is with social anxiety, but anxiety in general as well, because social anxiety was the main thing that I dealt with, but there was also a lot of other anxiety things happening in my life. So in general, anxiety is my jam. And I do only one-on-one coaching because I am just such a big believer that we need that individual approach.
Mhm.
As we say, it's all coming from unique experiences, unique cases, unique approaches. And I'm all about just inner work. So really diving deep into getting to the root of the anxiety, understanding where it's coming from, understanding how it's affecting your life as well. Because a lot of the time, it's actually affecting us in a lot more ways than what we are aware of.
Yes.
Building a lot of clarity around how it's affecting your life, a lot of self discovery along the way as well, diving deep into inner child healing and really just changing that script, changing the story that you're living by, writing
Yeah.
that script and learning to really step into it and change your beliefs and change your thoughts and taking back that control. And we do this through many different methods, and the methods can be quite different according to each person.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, though, I find it really helpful beginning with the yoga side because it can be a lot easier. So, when you're someone that experiences a lot of anxiety, if someone just tells you to sit there and breathe deeply, it can be really challenging because your mind's going to go in a million directions at once. Whereas when we are matching the breathing practices with the movement, you are giving yourself something to actually focus on doing as you're breathing. So, it's not telling you to just shut off your mind because it can be quite literally impossible at the time. It can make you feel more defeated, makes you feel stuck. So I think it's really important to sort of mix these two together, but at the same time, you're building that awareness around the connection between the mind and the body. How
Mhm.
the stretch is to stretch out the body to have that impact on the mind. But yeah, it's a lot about the inner work. We do look at some coping mechanisms throughout the way, just as ways to support yourself throughout the process. But
Yes.
having a really, really clear distinction between what is a coping mechanism and what is actually your healing work. I have nothing against coping mechanisms. They can be really helpful. And they're nice, like tool belt things to have to turn to when you need to in your day. But I think that a lot of people fall into that trap again of just relying on them and feeling like they are healing themselves by,
Yeah, I that's so important because there you do I mean honestly in the beginning you do need healthy coping mechanisms and tools because you're just not healed or regulated enough. But then yes, understanding that there's things you can do to heal and then there's things you can do to support symptoms and discomfort along the healing process. And I think that that often is not understood either.
yeah.
And I love that you really educate your clients with that and really helping them understand the difference.
Yeah, and like that's my main priority is to get people to understand. 'Cause again, this is the thing that I felt like I wanted more than anything is to understand what's happening in your mind, to understand what this is, like what actually is anxiety, what is your relationship with this anxiety, and just giving you the knowledge to actually take back control. Because I really don't think that we need to be relying on other things to make ourselves feel better, but also understanding ways that we can support our healing journeys. I'm really passionate about herbalism as well and learning how we can implement herbs and natural healing into our lifestyle as well. And it's not that you're using like a herb you're not relying on a single herb to solve your anxiety, but you can learn how to implement these herbs into your life to support that journey, to learn
Yes.
things that you can turn to. And I truly believe a lot of the time it's just the simplest forms of healing that can be the most powerful and
Yes.
that we just often look over. And this is something that I bring up a lot as well, just trusting simple processes.
Yeah, I mean, and also it's really not, I mean, simple and natural or alternative it is not seen as valid even still, right? In
Exactly.
mainstream. And so it's really, I mean, obviously the clients that come to you are people who are open and willing to try something that maybe isn't as mainstream.
Yeah, mainly it's people that have come from therapy or other quick fixes, and they just, they leave there feeling more hopeless than ever before.
Yeah, and they get to their own point where they're like, "I will try anything. I
Yeah,
don't care what it is," right? And
exactly.
it's you know what though? It's sad that we have to get to that point, right? It is, but that's where we're at as a society, like globally right now. And my prayer is that that can really shift and change.
And
And
at least we can see this beginning. I can't remember
I
what
agree.
countries it is. I'm sure there are at least two of them. I have a feeling Scotland was one of them, but I'm not 100% sure that they're actually starting to prescribe that time in nature and recognizing that deep connection with nature. And it gives us that little glimpse of hope,
There's a movement happening for
Yeah.
sure. It's small but mighty, and I think that it will continue to grow. And it's people like you who are a huge part of that, and I think it's incredible.
Yeah, it's just spreading the word, getting that awareness out there. I think it's sort of like our duty, as people that have become aware of this and have been through our own experiences. I think it's really important to just share this.
I agree, and I'm really thankful that you took the time to be here with me today, even with the significant time difference. So I really appreciate you, you guys. I'm really excited for people to connect with you. So look for Sophia's links in the show notes. If you resonated with her, go give her a follow. Go check out her website, the opportunities to work with her. And I know that you've worked with people globally, so that's not an issue for
So
you.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm just so thankful for this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story. I know it's going to give hope to so many.
Thank you so much.